everybody. Welcome back to the HotButteryRolls Whiskey Show. On today's episode, we're going to talk about a low-proof starter bourbon from the Jim Beam Small Batch Collection. Now, what does all that mean? Small batch is a term that was invented by Jim Beam companies, specifically Booker No, in response to the success of Elmer T. Lee's Blanton's single barrel. Whenever the wheels started moving on premium bourbon, the Jim Beam company didn't want to be caught behind, and so they came up with their own marketing gimmick, which included the Booker's, which is here. Booker's is named for Booker No, Knob Creek, and Baker's, which I don't happen to have a bottle of, as well as the Basil Hayden's line. So the Basil Hayden's original bourbon is an 80 proof offering. It is very, very light, easy to drink, and it's one that I've been recommending to people if they tell me that they haven't tried bourbon before. So let's get into it. This is standard Basil Hayden's, 80 proof, extremely soft on the nose. This is a high rye recipe that supposedly came from Basil Hayden himself. Very friendly, almost smells Canadian. Sweet vanilla, almost no oak, a little bit of rye spice. Just very, very easy to smell. Light banana. On the palate, it just almost disappears. This is, as one person stated, the LaCroix of bourbons. It's very, very grainy for a whiskey that is a premium offering from Jim Beam. It's got a light amount of nuttiness, nothing delicious like you'd expect from a Jim Beam premium product. Very, very easy to drink and light. A light amount of bitterness with that nutty flavor. It's just, it's not my favorite profile. So, who is Basil Hayden? Basil Hayden was one of America's early settlers, and in 1785, he moved from Maryland to Kentucky with 35 families. In addition to being a settler, he was also a distiller, and he came up with a high rye mash bill, and this is supposed to be very similar to what he made. So that first offering was regular Basil Hayden's. That's available just about anywhere that you can go that sells whiskey. Most hotels, most bars will have Basil Hayden's. This second one is the Basil Hayden's Rye, which is exclusive to 2017 as a release. Already, it's a sweeter on the nose. It's a rye, so it's 51% rye, at least. Much more spearmint flavor. It's extremely light, very difficult to pick notes out of because of the low concentration, but it's 80 proof whiskey, so you can't be too mad at it. That light bitterness is even more bitter in the rye than it was in the bourbon. A grainy youthfulness. No brown sugar in this one. I can't shake the taste that reminds me of Canadian whiskey, and I know that Canadian whiskeys are for the majority rye whiskeys, but this whiskey reminds me of almost like it has a grain neutral spirit mixed in, which is, it wouldn't be able to be called a bourbon or a rye whiskey if it had grain neutral spirit mixed in, but that's kind of what it reminds me of, is that kind of dead, grainy sweetness in the middle. Again, very easy to drink, but it's 80 proof. I wouldn't even put it with a cocktail. I would be terrified of what the cocktail mix would do to this very, very delicate whiskey. All right, so this one was about $44.99 where I'm from. MSRP, I believe, is $42.99. This one, I want to say I gave about $70 for. This one coming up, I know that I gave $80 for. This is the 10-year-old Basil Hayden's bourbon, which anytime you can get an age-stated whiskey, I encourage it. The regular Basil Hayden's is not age stated, but I've been told, I don't know if it's accurate, but I've been told that the average age of Basil Hayden's is anywhere between 7 and 9 years. So the almost $40 markup for a marginally older bourbon is a little bit irritating now that I know that. So much richer on the nose. Sweeter. The banana notes are more oaky. It's very light sweetness. Again, it's a high rye, so you get a little bit of minty notes. Trying to tease as much flavor as I can out. I just got the lightest whiff of anise, which is also known as black licorice. It's very much like the regular Basil Hayden's, but with a little bit more bitterness at the end of it. Certainly not an $80 bourbon. Yeah, I can't get over the youthful graininess of a 10-year-old bourbon. All right, so onward. This is a recent release. This is the 10-year rye, and I just got this bottle. It was also $79.99. It states on the back that it has sweet vanilla, oak, and subtle caramel. Faint tobacco lingers on the finish with hints of warm cinnamon. Bottled at 80 proof. I don't get that at all. Maybe light caramel, caramel, caribou, no tobacco. All right, let's go to the palate and see what's going on. So it is infinitely better than the regular rye. Sweet, a little more character. I don't get any cinnamon, but I do get a little bit of spearmint, a little bit of anise. More so than what I got in the regular rye. Almost a menthol sensation. If it wasn't 80 proof, if it was 90 proof or 100 proof, it would probably be much stronger. Again, unfortunately, certainly not worth $80. All right, moving along. This is a 2x2 rye. This is a blend of 2 ryes and 2 bourbons, and again, bottled at 80 proof. So this one definitely smells young. I do, however, get more traditional rye flavors. Almost reminds me of like a very, very weak Pikesville. I love Pikesville rye, and I could see how this was blended with some bourbons and some ryes, because Pikesville is a barely legal rye, which means that it's barely over the 51% rye component. And this one, having 2 bourbons mixed in, will probably be, you know, somewhere in that range of being a low rye. Sweet. It is Pikesville Junior on the nose. Let's go to the palate. That is unfortunate. So all the potential that it had on the nose just fell away at the palate. There's none of the dill and mint that was on the nose is on the palate. It's bitter. Almost a popcorn flavor, but not good movie popcorn, like unsalted diet popcorn for fat people. Yeah, diet popcorn for fat people. Oh, I don't love it. This is the dark rye. And the dark rye is the Kentucky straight rye whiskey mixed with Canadian rye whiskey, and it has a touch of port wine added. It is drastically darker, hence the name dark rye. It's got a great, beautiful port wine nose. Sweet, dark fruits, raisins, dark cherries. Beautiful on the nose, just really, really pretty. Most of what the nose is the port influence. I'm not getting any whiskey notes, no rye notes, no mintiness, no dill. But there is a really beautiful port wine note on the nose. Let's go to the palate. The palate's sweet. It's got a great port wine start. Across the middle, it is a little dead. Sometimes port wine whiskeys will give me a weird sort of cooked macaroni noodle note across mid palate, and this one definitely meets that criteria. It is miles ahead of every other offering that I've had so far as having establishable tasting notes. Now the last one, this is my son's favorite. My son was kind enough to help me with the idea for this episode. I asked him what I should review, and he said, you should do something for beginners. And he remembered that whenever I first got him started drinking whiskey, we started out with Basil Hayden's because it was 80 proof and it was something that wouldn't burn his tongue and wasn't barrel proof and, scald his face off, something that would be friendly. And we went through the regular Basil Hayden's, and then he tried the Basil Hayden's rye, tried the dark rye, and then he tried this Caribbean cask rye. And this is a rye whiskey that is a mix, again, of Kentucky and Canadian rye. It has also had a little bit of blackstrap rum added to it. It is dessert in a glass. It reminds me ever so slightly of the gingerbread house, frosted gingerbread house that is Angel's Envy rye. But this one is a little bit forced. It's not nearly as cohesive as the Angel's Envy rye. At 80 proof, it is obviously very low. I mean, if you look at the legs on this thing, it's just borderline Michelob Ultra. Beautiful color, probably from that blackstrap rum. On the palate, it is distinctly rum. The whiskey itself doesn't really, again, just like the dark rye, doesn't hold itself up. It's unfortunate because the rum finish is really good, and if they would have rum finished a Knob Creek or a Booker's, I think that it would have been, a much more powerful, flavorful whiskey. But, this is just kind of nondescript. On the rum side, it has a very, very sweet molasses, brown sugar, much more oaky than any of the others I've tried, including the 10-year iterations. Caramelized brown sugar. It's really pretty on the nose. On the palate, it's not nearly as filling as the nose, but it's got a great nose. Be a good car air freshener. Although you wouldn't want to get pulled over and smell like a pirate. All right, so guys, that was rough. To be honest, I used to recommend this to people that were getting into bourbon, getting into whiskey, as a great beginner because it's available anywhere. You can go to any bar and order it. It's relatively inexpensive, although it is a premium brand. And I regret it. I regret pointing people this direction. If you love Basil Hayden's, then that's great. I encourage you to continue to drink it. It's not for me, and it's not anything that I would push people towards. I will say that there are a couple of brands that are similar to it, even within the same house, that I would push people towards. The Knob Creek is one of those. This is a Knob Creek 120 proof. This is a store pick from Empire Liquors in Allen, Texas. It is a 15-year-old store pick, and it is one of the best bottles of whiskey that I have in my cabinet, and I paid $59 for it. Booker's is seen a recent price increase, but still in the $90, $80 to $100 range. I would say average of 90. So we're still within 10, 20 bucks of these 10-year-old 80 proof offerings. I'm gonna pick this every day, all day over those. And one thing that you may not know, there's another brand that's owned by Jim Beam, like Basil Hayden's, that was actually spawned by the Hayden family. Basil Hayden's grandson started Old Granddad Distillery in honor of his grandfather, Basil Hayden. This is now a Jim Beam product, and it is a bargain bottom shelf flavor bomb. This is 114 proof. I want to say I gave $24 for this one. It is a peanut butter heaven bomb. It is incredible. 114 proof is a little bit strong for a beginner, but add a little bit of water to it, pour it over ice, nothing wrong with it. I'm just gonna have to take a little tug, sorry guys. On the palate, typical Jim Beam nuttiness. Oh, brown sugar, sweet corn. It is a flavor bomb. It is fantastic. So I would recommend that. If you're gonna spend 40 something on this, then get 2 bottles of this and a bag of ice and knock yourself out. You may actually knock yourself out because it is 114 proof, and that is somewhat hotter than what most people are used to drinking. But I'm gonna offer a solution to the novice that could potentially help them avoid a poorer first experience. And for that, I suggest taking Knob Creek 120 proof. If you can get a store pick, particularly an older store pick, I recommend that strongly. But take your Knob Creek store pick, take your Glencairn, take your Knob Creek 120, and Go Gadget math skills. You take 2 parts of Knob Creek 120 proof, 1 part water. Suddenly you have an 80 proof whiskey that will stomp all over Basil Hayden's. Oh. I wish you could smell this. I wish you were here. Oh, so good. Even adding water, this is a flavor profile that includes brown sugar, honey roasted peanuts, caramelized sugar, oak, so much oak, all the oak. Whoever printed oak on the back of one of these bottles needs to be hit with a piece of it, because they've obviously never seen oak. Pipe tobacco. Oh man, this is just good. Cheers. On the palate, you have sweet peanut butter, more pipe tobacco, oak, but not a stringent oak, a sweet oak, a rich oak, more rich than sweet. So not like an Elijah Craig oaky, drying tannic oak, but a sweet, friendly, but rich and full oak. It's just so much better, infinitely better. So, all right guys, there you have it. As you can see, I've invested several $100s into the Basil Hayden's product line. The good news is you don't have to. If you would like a sample of this, reach out to me. I would be glad to save you the trouble and pain and embarrassment of owning 7 bottles of a brand that you could have replaced with a couple of very, very capable cousins from the same distillery. I'm gonna go back to this Knob Creek because it's the only thing that makes me feel better about wasting all that money. Cheers, everybody.